If they're apex predators, why are they hiding behind wreckage and arrogance? Fire again, center line. Strip that damn cruiser down to bones. Commander Finn Corrin's voice cracked across the battered command bridge, every syllable shot through clenched teeth. Sparks rained down from an exposed junction behind him, dancing over the metal floor as systems fought to stay online. The main laser plasma display flickered, then stabilized, showing the fragmented ruins of Outpost Harkin, now a drifting graveyard lit by the smoldering remains of its orbital yard. Chunks of hull spun lazily through the dark, twisted with black scorch marks where men had once manned anti-orbital guns. The scent inside Earth's orbital command wasn't some poetic battlefield aroma. It was harsh, bitter filtration chemicals burning under pressure, coolant bursting from split pipes, and the unmistakable reek of scorched polymer from overloaded terminals. A junior officer nearby was coughing into his sleeve, still covered in ash from a failed evacuation pod's explosion. The blast hadn't touched Corrin, but the memory had burned itself into his head. The pod launched half a meter, then cracked open mid-drift, venting its crew like dust from a shaken bottle. "Tracking another flare, Commander," said Lieutenant Rourke, barely audible through the ringing in his own ears. "Coming from debris Axis 7. Could be a Calthar beacon." Corrin didn't answer right away. He stared at the display, letting his jaw tighten with restraint. His hand rested on the railing, not for support, but to keep himself from punching through the console again. He had waited 5 years in strategic exile for this chair. 5 years wasted in think tanks, lecturing on fleet integrity and asymmetric doctrine, while Earth's high command burned time on diplomacy and budget caps. Now, they were being gutted for it. One colony at a time. "Scramble. A Blackwing recon. I want eyes, not guesswork." "Yes, Commander." The bridge lights dimmed momentarily as another energy reroute surged through the systems. On the overhead tactical array, the red-marked trajectory of the Calthar fleet was still unchanged. Slow, confident, methodical. They had launched their assault with no preamble, no ultimatum, just a precision strike on Earth's furthest defense cluster. Thousands dead before the second transmission even decrypted. Corrin glanced at the corner display. A heavily encrypted data stream finally resolved. The audio from the intercepted Calthar broadcast played back in their native dialect. Cold, snarling consonants. A machine voice overlay translated it. "The creatures display surface cohesion, yet internally bleed contradiction. Cut one and the limbs quarrel before they bleed. This planet will fall before it understands why." The room went quiet. Captain Maros, older, blunt-faced and nursing a fractured arm under a field wrap, broke the silence. "They're mocking us." "No," Corrin said slowly. "They're showing us their weakness." Rourke blinked. "Listen to that tone. That's not strategy. That's contempt. They've fought prey, never prey that studies." He moved to the central command station and pulled up a filtered Calthar formation scan. On paper, they were unstoppable. Biologically superior, faster reflexes, harder armor, reaction training bred into every warrior. Their ships moved with that same mindset. Aggressive, straight-line domination, daring the enemy to flinch. But their response times to side assaults had been slow. And the initial strike had obliterated the outpost, yes, but not its data core. Corrin's team had recovered partial logs. What he saw in them disturbed him less than the arrogance that had left them unsecured. "Rourke, patch me into joint ops. I want every fleet still breathing, regardless of class, on my frequency in 15 minutes. No exceptions. We're rebuilding the net with whoever's left." Maros raised an eyebrow. "The command web's fried, sir. You'd be flying blind." "I'm not flying anything," Corrin replied. "We're switching to civilian comms, underground mesh, no military tags. If the Calthar think we're disorganized, let's make it look worse, confuse their scans. If we play by their rules, we're done." The bridge shook, an aftershock from a failing stabilizer unit below. One of the techs, pale and bleeding from the temple, leaned over to stabilize a console that had begun to tip. He didn't complain. No one did. The silence here wasn't noble. It was because every word might be the last one spoken before the floor split open. Korn walked to the observation bay just forward of the tactical displays. The glass, reinforced to withstand moderate external impacts, was spider-cracked in one corner. He looked out at the debris still circling the station, a spinning, half-melted escape pod, a stabilizer fin shaped like a knife, a lone boot. He whispered, mostly to himself. We tried to meet the galaxy with open hands. They answered with teeth. Behind him, Rourke approached. Sir, command rerouting power from the civilian sectors. They're prioritizing inner orbit defenses. Korn turned. Tell them to reverse it. Prioritize the outer junk fields. That's where we hit first. Hit with what? With everything that's not nailed down. Refitted cargo trawlers, decommissioned mining rigs. We don't need sleek. We need unpredictable. He paced back toward the main floor. The Calthar believe in blood hierarchy. Strong eats weak. That belief makes them powerful, but brittle. They expect brute strength, not sleight of hand. Maros chuckled once. Painful. Bitter. You're planning to outmaneuver apex hunters. I'm planning to show them we don't chase food, we set traps. Silence. Then the command lights flickered again, more stable this time. Systems were realigning. Crews below were adapting. No time for repair. Only function. Only survival. Korn's voice rose as he stepped onto the command platform, addressing the entire bridge crew. We lost Harkin. We lost thousands. You'll want to break. You won't get the chance. From this point forward, they think we're bleeding. Let them. We'll bleed smoke. Bleed lies. Bleed fire. He pointed to the orbital chart. They think they see us. Let's become ghosts. Behind him, the Kelthar transmission played again. This time, no one winced. They were listening, calculating, learning. Because predators weren't defined by biology. They were defined by what they did next. The air in the underground war room tasted of iron and dried dust, as though the soil above had seeped through concrete over the years, grounding every breath in the reality of buried decisions. Commander Finn Corrin leaned over a display table bolted into the stone foundation. Its scratched surface flickered with unlined satellite feeds and repurposed atmospheric scans, patched together from remnants of military-grade comms and commandeered civilian traffic. He didn't need clarity, he needed confusion, weaponized and distributed. We'll start with old mining relays in Sector A9, he said, fingers tracing broken orbital loops across a projection riddled with holes. Recalibrate their output frequencies to mimic fleet chatter. Don't synchronize the pulses. Scatter them. Make it look like panic, not planning. Across from him, Analyst Vorik adjusted his cracked glasses and frowned. If we scramble fleet codes and reroute through private mesh nets, we lose security. The Calthar could track the patterns. Corrin snapped his gaze toward the man. Then we make the patterns lie. They'll read a dozen battle groups circling their flanks when we've only got 4 squadrons alive. We don't need security. We need misdirection. A distant rumble passed through the ground, followed by a short hiss from the ventilation shaft. No one flinched. Earth's inner crust had begun to quake more frequently under strain. Half from tectonics, half from orbital weapons that shook the upper atmosphere hard enough to shift tides. From the far corner, Lieutenant Harvin Thorne stepped forward, his voice low but steady. We've pulled registries on unaligned captains, ex-cargo haulers, border runners, even a few who fought during the Europa collapse. They're not polished, but they know what it means to fly blind. Names? Curran asked without looking up. Thorne handed over a battered tablet, more solder than screen. Captain Drax Ven, Used to run tri-moon shipments under Concorde's radar, claims he can slingshot a freighter through a debris ring blindfolded. And the rest? Kel Voren led a mutiny on a failed colonization push near Vega, burned half his own fleet to escape. He's unpredictable. Then there's Sorvet, ex-Nav Naval, court-martialed for firing unauthorized on a pirate armada. He won. They discharged him anyway. Corin nodded slowly. Get them here. Don't offer terms. Give them a target and the freedom to pick their own approach. Vorik hesitated. You're trusting outlaws to hold Earth's fate? I'm trusting that men who survived impossible runs know something about fear, Corin said quietly, and how to use it. He moved to the far side of the room, where a salvaged Calthar comms console sat in the dark like a fossilized wound. Scorch marks still marred its edges, evidence of the raid that had nearly destroyed the intelligence team tasked with retrieving it. Its screen pulsed once, triggered by a proximity link. The device had cost 15 lives. Corin planned to make it cost thousands more, just not human ones. Have we decrypted the emission layers yet? He asked. Thorne gestured to the rigged uplink beside the console. We've pulled partial command lines. Their code hierarchies complex, non-linear, voice-authorized, and nested by caste. But we've isolated mimic patterns from their fleet link beacons. Repurpose them. Strip the core logic. Leave the exterior framework intact. We need those pings to reflect false fleet signatures. Assign each phantom signal to a different clan dialect. We'll sow disloyalty before they realize they're alone. A sudden buzz from the table pulled their attention. A thermal spike reading from the outer ring sensors. Calthar warships passing near Saturn's rings had pinged a listening buoy Corin's crew had disguised as a defunct mining stabilizer. Their formations were still tight, still confident. Burnell. He turned back to the table and began drafting fleet restructuring orders, his fingers moving with sharp, exacting intent. Split the remaining destroyers into ghost teams, no more than 5 per group. Assign each squad a separate vector and radio back through different Civlink clusters. Cycle identities every 6 hours. If even one thread gets traced, the whole pattern resets. Thorne raised an eyebrow. And if they jam the mesh net? They won't. Not until they suspect it matters. The air tasted different down here now, less like dust, more like old breath held too long. The space was too deep, too cut off from the chaos above. Every light carried a faint orange tint, and the recycled temperature control made skin itch and metal sweat. Outside, cities were evacuating by the hour. Corin couldn't afford that panic to reach this bunker. He leaned in closer to the map again. We'll broadcast decoy retreat signals along Neptune's ice corridor. Let them think we're abandoning our outer colonies. Vorik spoke hesitantly. We are abandoning them, aren't we? Corin's eyes didn't move. No. We're turning them into bait. The silence that followed wasn't tension, it was comprehension. Every man in that room had now glimpsed what they were becoming. Not defenders, not warriors. Illusionists. Harvin stepped closer, and if the Calthar call the bluff, they won't. Apex predators don't anticipate misdirection. They charge. They overwhelm, they win, because no one teaches prey to lie. Vorik tapped the map, highlighting the modified fleet symbols now scattered across the system. Sir, this many signals, even faked, could trigger their second wave early. We might not be ready. Corin stepped away from the table. We'll never be ready, in their eyes. That's our advantage. The more fractured we look, the more they delay to enjoy the spectacle. He walked toward the far door, a sealed vault that led into the older Black Ops archives, untouched since the Europa protocols were mothballed. The stories that had emerged from those corridors were whispered, not documented. I need 1 hour alone, Corin said. No one follows, no one asks. Thorne saluted. Vorik hesitated, then turned back to the map. As the door sealed shut behind him, Corin descended into silence and shadows. The hallway was cold, the walls lined with sensor coils that flickered at his presence. The lights didn't illuminate fully, just enough to show the way, just enough to hint at what had once been hidden here. Because real war planning didn't happen on screens. It lived in the quiet between disasters, in rooms where morality bent under necessity, and futures were weighed against sacrifices not yet made. Corin didn't need clean lines and polished graphs. He needed ghosts. And by morning he'd have a system full of them. The first detonation didn't echo. It ruptured silently in the cold orbit of Calfar Refinery Outpost Zarek 4, a fireball blooming in the black like an unspoken insult. The depot, housing enough fuel to power 2 carrier fleets, burst open along its spine, sending molten conduits and shredded storage tanks spiraling outward. Liquid propellant ignited, clinging to everything it touched, wrapping alloy scaffolds in a writhing curtain of light. No war cry, no flag, just ruin. Commander Finn Corin stood inside Earth's remote uplink chamber, his eyes locked on a live intercept from a microdrone hidden in the asteroid shadows. The screen showed the depot's wreckage, tumbling between frozen rocks, pieces still glowing, spinning with unstable inertia. An overlay of incoming Calthar fleet chatter scrolled down the left syllables, rapid and unfiltered. 3 clans responding, said Vorik, fingers racing across the adjacent console. No agreement on cause. Warlord Rektu accuses Dareth's fleet of sabotage. Corin didn't flinch. That's our cue. Feed them the fake logs, now. Vorik uploaded the manipulated broadcast, a fabricated intercept showing a falsified transmission fragment from Dareth's warship near Zarek 4. The accent, the inflection, both lifted from real surveillance but stripped of context, twisted into threat. Thorn, watching from the corner with his jacket half unzipped, exhaled slowly. You think they'll bite? Corin stared at the feed. They're not biting. They're already bleeding. We're just telling them who to blame. The room smelled of rusted coolant and old sweat. Every screen cast a different glow, none of them steady. Outside, Earth's command still posed as disorganized, but down here, among the buried systems and forgotten backup cores, the war was shifting. On the far monitor, another drone view came online, this time from Asteroid Corridor 8Y. A second fuel relay exploded moments later, its destruction masked by a decoy mining skiff sent in hours before, rigged with a makeshift fusion spike. That skiff had belonged to Captain Vin, now listed officially as deceased in deep salvage, a title that bought him invisibility. Vorik spoke again, quieter this time. Multiple Calthar captains now accusing each other of strategic negligence. One command thread just terminated mid-sentence. No confirmation yet, but we think it was a clan execution. Corin nodded. That's 2 for 2. Keep watching. Their arrogance won't let this stay quiet. Thousands of kilometers away, hidden beneath an asteroid's fractured ridge, Strike Team Ravel sat in silence, breathing recycled air through mouth filters, eyes locked on instruments glowing faint blue. Their ship, a jury-rigged transport core retrofitted with Calfar signal emitters, matched enemy beacon codes almost perfectly. It drifted within their patrol zones, undetected. Captain Doran, the strike leader, kept his gaze on the chronometer. 17 seconds to payload drop. Ready the shutter. His crew, former smugglers, some barely trained, worked like surgeons. Grease under their fingernails. Stale breath. Silence only broken by the creak of heated frames cooling down between burns. The bomb. An old mining charge packed with compressed hull needles slid silently through the outer airlock, propelled by inertial release. It would lodge in the outer wall of the Calthar's secondary refinery post and pierce its internal line before combusting. No shockwave, no flash, just a shatter and cascade. At Earth command, Thorn leaned forward. Rabel's gone silent. Vorik checked 3 back channels. Final ping was 93 seconds after deployment. Interference could be natural, could also be structural collapse. Corin remained motionless. They completed the strike? Vorik nodded. Confirmed. Then they knew the costs. No medals would follow, no names released. Their vassals didn't officially exist. The debris found afterward would show only stripped serials and false transponders. Earth's enemies would see nothing but ghosts. Corin moved toward the central console and opened the raw audio channel, a direct pull from Calthar military frequencies. He adjusted the filters to remove static, isolating voices. One stood out, deeper than the rest, its tone furious and clipped. Cowards within our bloodline invite prey into our veins. Dareth hides his mistakes behind accusation. This dishonors the hierarchy. Another responded, higher and more controlled. Our scouts detected unauthorized pings from your domain. Don't pretend strength when your walls leak fire. The transmission ended abruptly. Cut feed, Corin ordered. Archive and label that one. That was genuine, not performance. Thorn stepped closer. You really think they'll break into civil war over this? They won't call it civil war, Corin said. They'll call it blood cleansing, ritual vengeance, doctrinal purging. It doesn't matter, the result's the same. He adjusted the fleet distribution chart. Deploy the next team through Corridor 9L. Don't hit anything yet. Let them feel watched. Vorik tilted his head. You want hesitation? I want paranoia. The room darkened slightly as Earth rotated another degree below them. Outside, the world looked the same. Cities still blacked out, transport routes pulsing in silent retreat. But inside this chamber, hope began to coalesce. Not from victory, but from fracture. The enemy had shown their weakness, not by flinching, but by arguing. Back in orbit around Zarek 4, Calthar recovery ships circled in disarray. Command signals conflicted, one ordering salvage, another demanding withdrawal. Combat drones hovered without instruction, waiting for inputs that contradicted each other. A drone, Earth-modified disguised as debris, picked up the confusion and sent it home. Corin watched the data scroll. They're not scared yet, but they're uncertain. That's the first crack. Thorn crossed his arms. You think we'll ever get a real engagement? We don't want one. If we engage, we fight their strength. If we vanish, they fight shadows. He paused. We are those shadows now. Outside, another drone feed blinked to life. Another refinery. Another fireball. And another nameless crew gone. Strike frequency confirmed. Repeat, target lock stable. We are green across every pod. Ignition on your mark. The voice came low through static, thick with static feedback from overloaded comm relays. Lieutenant Gar Vex sat strapped into a retrofitted long-range glider rig, watching through a cracked canopy as Draxus Prime's crescent glow rose behind the fractured silhouette of the Calthar repair yards. The moon's broken rings glittered faintly, casting distorted shadows across the skeletal gantries that cradled enemy cruisers like sleeping predators mid-mold. Inside Earth's hidden command vault, Commander Finn Corin leaned over a tactical projection crafted from stitched telemetry, stolen recon data, and projections built on enemy pride. The air in the chamber was dry, thick with the scent of dust layered over burning insulation from the last backup core failure. Gloved technicians moved with urgency through heat haze rising from overworked processors. A single mistake in the timing and Earth's best shot at flipping the war would break like glass. Tell them to stagger the decoys, Corin ordered. We drop 3 beacons before every payload. The false chatter must sound desperate, like damaged ships scrambling to regroup. Vorik adjusted the broadcast cue. You want them to think we're crawling. I want them to think we're crawling home. On screen, Earth's Ghost Fleet deployed their improvised payloads. They weren't clean missiles or elegant probes. Each strike package was housed inside a retired civilian hauler, painted to reflect inactive Calfar warcruiser tones. The approach routes were built from scavenged courier data loops. Slow, unthreatening, deliberate. Then came the scream. The first impact ignited near the main Calfar resupply gantry. A rupture in the primary stabilizer coil chain tore open the scaffolding, sending coolant spray and ruptured load arms spiraling into the station's mid-level bays. Workers inside, unarmored, unsuspecting, were crushed under imploded wall sections. A cascade of pressure alarms lit up across the enemy fleet. 2 seconds later, 3 more detonation points followed, none from known fleet weapon signatures. From orbit, it looked like the yard simply tore itself open under its own weight. Second phase, Corin said. Now. Thorn triggered the broadcast, a falsified Calthar command burst allegedly sent from Warlord Dureth's secondary carrier, embedded with clan-level encryption and a forged voice key, stolen from their prior intercepts. Phase directive denied. Dareth does not recognize authority from holotitles. Purge the weak. Burn them clean. The message was timed to hit public military channels, short enough to be heard, long enough to spark betrayal. Within 12 minutes, a response emerged from Rec 2's command frigate. You broke formation, you refused honor, you brought prey into sacred sky. And then they fired. A Calthar destroyer, orbiting near the lower ring of Drax's Prime's shipyard, launched a retaliatory barrage at a sister ship anchored 20 kilometers away. Surveillance logs showed the initial strike turned into a full brawl within 8 minutes, with auxiliary units caught in the crossfire. Are we sure they're buying it? Thorn muttered, watching the chaos ripple through the feed. They're not buying, Corin said. They're proving their pride. Inside the burning yard, Earth's glider units dropped their final payloads and peeled away. Captain Vex's team had no shields, no backup fleet, only preloaded magnetic flight slingshot paths that flung them into the cold black. One glider failed to separate cleanly. No distress beacon followed. No voice returned. Lost contact with Unit C, came the report. Corin nodded once. Log it. Proceed with burial entry. Nothing to recover. There's no grave in vacuum, only the story. Thorn stepped closer, squinting at the next telemetry pulse. Sir? There's something else, a signal repeating from the enemy comm grid. Audio loop. Translated, it says, judgment comes from within the clan. The sky doesn't speak for us. Corin folded his arms. They're building excuses for internal cleansing. They won't accept sabotage. That would mean weakness. Vorik's fingers danced across his console. We're seeing war councils now. Multiple Calthar command layers forming their own directives without shared top-down cohesion. They've splintered, Corin said. They don't know it yet, but they have. Across Earth's remaining outposts, the news spread in fragments. Pilots grinned through cracked visors. Technicians played back recordings of Calthar on Calthar fire. Ships marked for scrapping were suddenly pulled back into service, painted in reflective alloys to mimic incoming light fields. Cheaper than full stealth, but effective when layered with false signatures. In one makeshift hangar on the dark side of Luna, Commander Delkmar addressed a squad of new volunteers. Many were untrained, some were half-healed. All of them had seen something explode that should have killed them, and survived. You've got 5 hours of oxygen, 3 hours of burn, and maybe 10 minutes of usable targeting sensors, he told them. That's more than our boys had at Zarek 4, and they broke a supply chain built to feed galaxies. Don't talk to me about odds. The only number that matters is how many of you return with fire in your wake. Inside the war room, Corin watched the slow unfolding of a pattern he had once only theorized. A predator, pushed to paranoia, starts snapping at its own limbs. Earth had just handed the Calthar a mirror, and now they bled while they stared into it. Smoke drifted through the collapsed arch of Earth Command's east wing, curling around shattered beams and exposed cabling like fingers clawing for heat. The smell wasn't theatrical. It was burnt concrete, scorched plastic insulation, and the copper tang of blood baked dry against rebar. Commander Finn Corrin stood ankle-deep in debris, his boots scraping across broken floor tiles, still warm from the heat strike that tore through this corridor just 40 hours earlier. "They didn't hit for advantage," said Major Rout, voice strained through a fractured jaw brace. "They hit to remind us we bleed." Corrin didn't answer. He shifted aside a scorched helmet bearing no markings. The floor beneath it had melted, fusing into the wall. Nothing else remained of its owner. Satellite imagery had already confirmed the scale. 17 cities across 3 continents suffered direct impacts. Calthar assault beams bypassed orbital defenses entirely by leaching onto Earth's own signal relays, piggybacking entry vectors through old, abandoned satellite arrays no one thought still active. They hit hospitals, ports, transit bridges. Tactically, Earth had won. 5 Calthar cruisers disabled, 1 flagship downed near Saturn, their exit paths disrupted by decoy jammers disguised as derelict freighters. But that didn't matter to the man Corrin watched now, an engineer, face hollow, sorting through concrete chunks trying to find his brother's badge. He didn't ask for help. He didn't cry. He just searched. Back inside the central recovery hub, the main screens cycled through static feeds. Refugee zones on highlands, new makeshift command cells inside retrofitted bunkers, flight logs listing what was left of Earth's active fleet. Thorne approached, left hand stitched and wrapped from wrist to elbow. "We've accounted for 72% of personnel. The rest are missing or vaporized." Vorik followed, his voice tight. "Public communication lines are back, barely. Civilian leaders are demanding a ceasefire. Some are calling for your removal." Corrin turned. "Tell them we'll hold elections when the sky stops falling." "There's footage," Thorne added. "From Mayan province. You need to see it." They moved to a side terminal patched into the raw feed loop. The video opened with a shaking frame. Someone's personal drone camera, likely programmed for atmospheric drift. A blast crater took up half the image. On the other side, a boy, maybe 12, sat beside an unrecognizable mass covered with a burnt sheet. He said nothing. He didn't blink. He just sat, one hand resting gently on the blanket's edge. Corrin's breath didn't change. Overlay that footage with the Calthar broadcast from the same timestamp. Vorik hesitated, then pulled it in. The timing matched. A triumphant enemy voice boasted of their cleansing strike against the Earth breed's stronghold. Corrin's knuckles tightened against the table. "Push this footage across every channel. No filters. No edits. Make it loop." "You want that playing during active rescue?" Thorne asked. "I want it playing everywhere. In refugee tents, in orbit, in the cafeteria of every ground station. If people are going to scream, let them scream with purpose." Outside, 2 civilians dragged a dislocated support beam off the remnants of an escape stairwell. They moved with the dull coordination of the sleep-deprived. No gear, no gloves, just grit and a quiet understanding that no one else was coming. Above them, the orbital graveyards grew denser by the hour. Dozens of ships had broken apart in the counterattack. Some floated as intact husks, some reduced to twisted ribs drifting in Earth's gravity sink. Rescue crews worked in tight EV suits, scraping ice from visor seals and hauling body bags by tether. Corrin stepped onto the comms dais and opened a live channel to all remaining fleet units. "This is Commander Corrin. You've seen what happened. Some of you lost friends, some lost cities, a few lost everything except the uniform you're still wearing. The enemy thinks this makes us weaker." He paused as his voice echoed through cracked hallways, bouncing off dented plating and shattered tactical consoles. "They believe their strike broke our center. What they don't see is what I see. Rescue ships launching from rusted platforms, field units scrubbing data from half-functional terminals, power crews rerouting current through wet tunnels just to keep lights on. They struck hard. But we are still standing, and That is what they don't understand. You can't bomb what keeps rebuilding itself. He ended the broadcast without ceremony. In the bunker's operations wing, 2 young pilots reviewed mission footage from their last engagement. Neither spoke for a long time. One finally whispered, "Was it worth it?" The other didn't answer. Corin watched them through the observation glass, then walked back toward the central corridor. As he passed a wall lined with names etched in temporary ink across dry concrete, his eyes caught one. Vex, Gar, no rank listed, no designation, no retrieval. Thorn caught up behind him. The population's angry. They should be. They're scared. Thanks should be. So what now? Thorn asked. Now we give them someone to become. Outside, the horizon flickered. Not from sunrise, but from torchlight, spread across rooftops and cliff faces where civilians had set flares for returning crews. The color wasn't uniform, the shapes weren't organized, but the message carried in every direction. We're still here. And we're not done. Jupiter loomed behind the asteroid belt like a silent witness, its swirling storms casting fractured colors across drifting ice shards and fractured rock. The temperature in the cockpit of Strike Leader Tarn Vex Modified Interceptor dropped below safe comfort, his gloved fingers tightening around the flight sticks as he stared out at the debris field they'd rigged with sensor disruptors, solar flares, and pulse decoys. The belt stretched before him, chaotic in motion but entirely mapped in the neural patterns of the pilots under his command. Every orbit, every pocket, every death corridor. Phantom 3 in position, came a voice through the channel, hushed, focused. Lure confirmed, Calthar mainline adjusting vector. They took the bait. Back in the forward command outpost dug into the hollowed asteroid designated Echo 7, Commander Finn Corin stood before the live feed stitched together from Earth's orbital satellite echoes and relay drones. The interior of the asteroid creaked around him, stone slowly grinding against its own orbit. Heat leaked from old reactor vanes, powering the uplinks. The air tasted of stale adhesive, recycled tin, and dust caught from generations of drifting collisions. Deploy reflective spikes, Corin ordered. Layer the frequency noise at staggered intervals. Make it look like they're chasing 20 targets. Thorn leaned forward at the adjacent terminal. Their flagships moving faster than expected. If they sense the loop in the distress signal, they won't. Their command's fractured. The moment they smell vulnerability, they'll chase it blind. The fake troop call had been broadcast 3 hours prior, spliced from recordings of Earth soldiers shouting for airlift in Kree dialect, amplified by a civilian distress marker from the destroyed colony at Mayan province. The Calthar had heard it and moved as expected, driven more by ritual dominance than strategic sense. Inside the belt, Earth's shadow squadrons peeled silently from behind rotating rocks, their ships coated in particle-resistant material, reflecting ambient light patterns to remain invisible to most scans. Captain Dur Valen's squadron used frozen asteroid cores as launch pades, slingshotting through narrow crevices with practiced familiarity. Targeting arrays at 60%, no radar confirmation, Valen said. We're ghosts. Beck's voice followed. On my mark. Fire-controlled bursts only. Aim for flight cores. We want chaos, not ash. The first salvo struck a Calthar destroyer's rear stabilizers, sending it into an uncontrolled spiral. Its side cannons fired reflexively, spraying into nearby vessels. Confusion followed instantly. No ID on attacker signatures, no clarity on formation gaps. Within 6 minutes, 2 more ships were damaged by friendly fire. One Calthar warlord demanded a withdrawal. Another accused him of sabotage. Inside Echo 7, Vork grinned without humor. Interference packet just hit their comm sync. Clan nodes aren't aligning. Corin didn't smile. They're too proud to coordinate when challenged. Strike teams request backup. Enemy forming concentrated burn vectors toward asteroid Epsilon Line. Corin scanned the topography maps. Collapse path F12. Detonate charges only when they breach range window. Make them dodge. keep them reactive. Earth's teams had buried the failsafes a week prior, during a drift pass through the belt. They were directional kinetic warheads, designed not for destruction, but to shove boulders across trajectory lines, breaking clean paths into jagged traps. Thorn triggered the signal. From orbit, it looked like the belt shifted by itself. Half-ton rocks collided mid-spawn, fragmenting into 1,000 razor-sharp shards that careened into Calthar flanks like a minefield gone kinetic. Hulls tore open, navigation systems overloaded with collision warnings. Panic spread across their channels. "They're losing their top-layer comms," Vorik reported, mid-commands reverting to autonomous targeting. "Which means," Corin said, stepping back, "they're no longer fighting a war. They're hunting shadows with torches." Back in the asteroid belt, Captain Valen's squadron executed their cross-pattern run. They fired reflective bursts off rotating debris surfaces, tricking the Calthar's sensors into firing at ghosts. The Earth ships danced between asteroids, using the delay between line of sight and trajectory prediction to stay invisible. One Earth interceptor Phantom 6 clipped a rotating shard, its hull torn open. No ejection. No signal. "Confirm Phantom 6 down," Vex said coldly. "Logging debris point for recovery." "Do not break formation," Valen replied. "We end this now." Corin issued the final order. "Signal net burn 3. We hit the flagship." On cue, Earth's snipers, hidden behind asteroid shadows, fired triangulated bursts of energy at the Calthar flagship's navigation array. 3 beams converged. The effect wasn't dramatic. The hull didn't explode. It just tilted, slightly off course, then locked into drift. Calthar formations broke instantly. Without flagship commands, lower vessels defaulted to clan directives. Some turned back, others charged. 3 ships collided mid-retreat. "Victory confirmed," Vorik said, voice thin with exhaustion. "Primary threat neutralized. Calthar retreat path fragmented." Thorn leaned back, sweat clinging to his neck collar. "How many did we lose?" 28, including 6 from the first coil wave. Corin didn't respond immediately. He looked to the static map where half the asteroid belt now spun with fragments of ships, both enemy and Earthborn. "Get the names to Orbit Command, tag their wrecks. No one's forgotten." In the distance, beyond the belt's edge, Calthar ships limped back toward their staging worlds, comms still fractured. Earth's net remained intact. They'd walked into the field confident they were the hunters. They left bleeding from terrain they never understood. The red haze over Mars wasn't just dust. It was fractured hulls, drifting oxygen leaks, and scorched debris from orbital railguns turned molten by sustained fire. Mars Station Delta had fallen silent 4 hours earlier, its final pulse transmission cut off mid-word. Now its shattered framework orbited in slow tilt, dragging pieces of its own spine behind it like a wounded animal. Inside Earth's Mobile War Command Unit, now stationed in Mars's outer gravity shelf, Commander Finn Curran stood over the tactical array, surrounded by a fleet that no longer resembled the one they'd launched with. Hull plating on most ships was patchwork. Half the engines bled power from improvised fuel mixes. Entire wings were manned by volunteers who'd trained on flight simulators with cracked screens and worn-out chairs. "They've committed the core," said Thorn, stepping through the scorched entry flap, his chestplate dented from close impact. "That's the Calthar flagship. Confirmed trajectory, Mars direct. They're not flanking, they're charging." Corin didn't shift. His fingers moved across the console, dragging the fleet's remains into a new configuration. A funnel, narrow at the base, wide at the throat, shaped by gravitational pull and strategic placement of orbital wreckage. A trap, forged from fire and failure. "Do they know?" Vorik asked, voice husky from days without rest. "They think they've broken us," Corin replied. "We'll make them feel right until they hit the wall." Down in the Martian colonies, What was left of human infrastructure had been converted to blind spots and decoys. Power arrays rerouted to flare fields, irrigation towers acting as passive sensor reflectors, transport cranes disguised as launch points. Calthar long-range optics had picked up the signals and interpreted them as Earth's final evacuation staging. They didn't see the kill corridors hidden beneath the noise. All squadrons in final position, came the report from orbit. Outer fighters have fuel for one pass. Inner ring expected to hold no more than 8 minutes. That's all we need, Corin said. The Calthar spearhead crested Mars's orbital plane like a blade, cutting through wreckage with terrifying momentum. Their flagship dwarfed every ship around it, its hull layered in armor etched with clan markings. Smaller escort ships moved erratically, too many conflicting orders, too many fractured comms from earlier defeats. Still, they advanced. Corin activated the first trigger. 3 Earth gunships, hidden behind debris fields, opened fire at intersecting angles. Their beams caught the leading edge of the enemy column, severing one cruiser's right propulsion. It veered sideways, clipped a support craft, and exploded. "Channel them forward," Corin barked. "Do not chase stragglers. Keep the corridor tight." Another Earth team, Vex Final Squadron, burned through from low Mars orbit and slammed into the flagship's outer perimeter. One of their ships was torn apart instantly. 2 others collided with enemy hulls and detonated in bursts of energy fire, shredding secondary armor layers, but failing to breach the core. Inside the command dome, Thorn gritted his teeth. It's not slowing. Their flagship's rerouted power to main drives. They're forcing full thrust to punch through. "We need someone to get inside," Corin said. "The core reactor's still open. Their hull repairs never closed it completely after Draxus. We saw it in the belt." Boric stepped forward. "We don't have anything fast enough to get in and survive that blast radius. We don't need a survivor." The room went still. From the far side, a voice spoke. Calm, sharp. "I'll take it." All heads turned. Eric's Dorn stood in flight gear stained from carbon scoring and hydraulic fluid. His left arm was still partially bandaged. He'd flown 6 missions in the last 8 days. 4 successful, 1 a recovery op, 1 where the rest of his squad hadn't come back. "You don't even have a wingman left," Thorn muttered. "I won't need one," Dorn replied. "I just need an angle." Corin stared at him. "You understand what this means? I understand the cost of watching 3 outposts burn because we didn't finish the job." He moved to the launch dock without waiting for approval. No music, no ceremony. His ship, a narrow-frame interceptor retrofitted with overcharged thrusters and stripped hull, wasn't meant to survive atmosphere. It barely held together at launch, but it was fast. Inside the cockpit, Dorn sealed the last panel with one hand and keyed into the internal broadcast. "To all flight crews, target acquired, orders clear, open the path, and then hold." Outside, Earth's remaining fleet opened a corridor. The Calthar flagship's flanks were pinned in, debris on the left, redirected fire on the right. Dorn dropped in from above. The moment he hit their sensor range, they fired. 3 energy bursts lit up the red clouds of Mars's upper orbit. He banked left, scraped through the wake of a broken cruiser, and plunged into the breach left by Vex's earlier hit. Calthar command scrambled. Rear cannons turned, but too slowly. Dorn's ship rotated on its yaw, flipped vertical, and aimed for the exposed conduit between the flagship's core reactor vents. He armed the last core breach torpedo and said nothing until he was 3 seconds from impact. His voice hit every Earth frequency. "Let them fear prey that thinks." Then static. Inside Earth Command, the flagship ruptured on-screen, an interior ignition folding the structure inward, then tossing fragments into Martian orbit. Fire spread across enemy formation. Their rear ships scattered, some collided. Others disengaged and veered off course. The war was over. Not because Earth had outnumbered them, Because Eric's Dorn had made them understand what thinking prey could do. The final Calthar war report came through a fractured feed. Grainy, time-stamped, intercepted mid-broadcast from a shattered relay buoy drifting near their border worlds. No formal surrender, no declaration, just a broken chain of commands, clan calls overlapping, each warlord calling the other a traitor. Vessels turned on their own, strongholds went dark by the day. Calthar space, once a symbol of apex domination, had become a graveyard of pride and unfinished alliance. Inside Unified Earth Command's Central Assembly Hall, silence blanketed the chamber as the recording ended. No one spoke. Not the generals, not the civilian observers, not the junior aides with datapads trembling in their hands. Only Corin moved. He stood at the platform's edge, his posture steady despite the limp in his left leg, and the thin scar that still hadn't closed above his collarbone. He studied the delegates, representatives from former neutral systems, outer colonies, galactic commerce clans. Weeks ago, many of them had prepared to issue demands to Earth. Now, they waited for Earth to speak first. Corin leaned forward. We didn't ask for this war. We didn't ask to be tested. We were weighed, insulted, and attacked without warning. And still, we didn't seek conquest. He paused, letting his eyes meet every ambassador. But we learned. A quiet flicker passed through the chamber's communication ring as whispers translated his words across a dozen languages. A Ulic delegate from the Andron cluster leaned back, antenna twitching in discomfort. The Ishari representative beside him closed his record log and nodded once. Corin turned and walked off the dais. Outside, the central plaza was filled with people, veterans, civilians, recovered cadets. On the moon's defense ring, crews had just finished engraving the names of the final strike team. Among them, etched deeper than the others, was one. Dorn, Eric's. The metal looked freshly burned, its letters blackened by torch to never fade under solar glare. A father, hand on his daughter's shoulder, pointed toward it. It flew straight into their heart, he said. So the rest of us could stay human. The girl squinted upward, then whispered something too quiet to catch. Back inside the archives chamber, Vorik walked alongside Thorn, both reviewing the doctrine sheets, now marked for global implementation. The strategic brief was simple, clean, deadly. The Corin doctrine, stealth, adaptation, and misdirection, as the foundation of Earth's future warfare. No more open formations, Thorn muttered. No more reliance on brute scale, Vorik added. We don't match strength. We erode assumptions. Corin watched them pass without speaking. He stepped through a narrow access corridor, one used only by former staff before the war began. It led to a private chamber, bare walls, cold floors, one reinforced desk, and a viewing screen hardwired to orbital feeds. He sat slowly, joints sore from weeks of low-pressure environments, and tapped the screen. Footage rolled from orbit, Earth, scarred but whole. Mars, still red but no longer bleeding. The belt, a scatter field of wreckage where their ghosts still drifted. Ships passed in formation across the lower frame. Smaller now, leaner, faster, reshaped for speed and unpredictability. Report from the Talvani Accord just came in, said Thorn over the room comm. Their envoy withdrew their earlier sanctions. They're calling Earth strategically untouchable. Corin didn't look up. They'll still watch us. Ashad? He disconnected the feed. Alone, Corin leaned back, letting the silence stretch. For a moment, he saw Dorn's last flight on the inner screen, played again by a monitoring system that hadn't deleted its cache. No hero music, no closing words. Just one phrase, left raw in the relay logs. Let him fear prey that thinks. Corin tapped the terminal and overlaid Earth's official galactic profile. What once labeled them as a low-mobility, non-expansionist species now bore a warning tier. Cognitive warfare specialists. Do not engage without multi-clan consensus. It didn't come from Earth? It came from the last surviving Calthar records before their alliance councils splintered. Far above, on the edge of Earth's monitoring grid, 2 alien vessels hovered in neutral range. No weapons drawn, no transmissions sent. The ships wait. Inside one, a translator unit activated as the crew observed Earth's silent orbital rings. An aide whispered, "Should we still proceed with the demands?" The elder commander didn't blink. His voice dropped. "No, not here." The aide hesitated. "But why, the humans?" "They're not what they were," the elder interrupted. "There's something else now. Look again." Both vessels turned quietly from orbit and departed without signal. Earth didn't chase. In Corrin's chamber, the final command log was closed and archived. Systems dimmed. He stood, slowly, walked to the window overlooking the northern hemisphere and let his hand rest against the cold surface. For all their destruction, the planet was still turning. He whispered, barely audible, as the clouds rolled beneath the orbital arc. They warned of an apex predator. Earth made one from prey. If this story left a mark, hit that like button, subscribe for more Humanity First legends, and drop your favorite Quill moment in the comments below.